We need to get rid of the regulations that are taking 15 years to get critical minerals out of the ground. And we can be an economic powerhouse around the world. We have to unleash Canada.
Canada is entering one of its most turbulent political and economic chapters in decades. Outside its borders, Washington is tightening tariffs, using 25% steel and aluminum duties as leverage to force Ottawa into concessions in ongoing trade negotiations. August 1st looms as a critical deadline. Without a deal, Canada faces a slow-burning trade war that could cost billions. Inside its borders, the pressure is no less severe. Premiers from resource-rich provinces such as Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan are openly expressing frustration with Ottawa's slow, over-regulated approach, warning that Canada is falling behind while opportunities slip away.
Canada's premiers are set to start meeting tomorrow in Ontario's cottage country, a three-day gathering that'll include Prime Minister Carney. Topping the agenda, trade, tariffs, and protecting the economy amid Donald Trump's most recent tariff ultimatum.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is confronting an uncomfortable truth. U.S. tariffs are here to stay unless Canada makes major trade concessions. 25% duties on steel and aluminum are already crippling industries. Ontario, Canada's manufacturing engine, imports most of its steel I-beams but now pays a double tariff, 25% to bring them in, 25% when products cross back south. The result? Billions in losses for construction projects and skyrocketing costs for beer and soda manufacturers dependent on aluminum. Washington is not backing down. Advisors close to Ontario's premier have warned bluntly, if there's no deal by August 1st, Canada enters a new tariff era. Ontario's premier, typically moderate, is now openly pushing for a tougher stance. He's urging provinces to buy Canadian-made cars, steel, and industrial equipment, arguing it's the best way to hit back at the U.S. economy. We are America's #1 customer. We buy more U.S. goods than Japan, China, Korea, the UK, and France combined. They need us more than we need them. But Ottawa's approach remains cautious, favoring negotiation over confrontation, creating a growing rift between federal and provincial strategies.
Prime Minister Mark Carney about the state of trade talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. This meeting was to be taking place during the week that Canada and the U.S. were finalizing a new trade deal, as Carney and Trump had agreed to during the G7 summit.
While Carney talks about national unity, Western premiers are moving ahead on their own. Danielle Smith, Alberta, has blasted Ottawa for wasting decades and hundreds of billions by blocking energy pipelines and over-regulating natural resource projects. Alberta is now quietly negotiating direct energy deals with the U.S., effectively bypassing federal oversight. Scott Moe, Saskatchewan, echoes Smith, demanding streamlined mining regulations, pointing out that it currently takes 15 years to get critical minerals out of the ground. Even Doug Ford, Ontario, who often supports Ottawa, has shifted. We need to unleash Canadian industry or we'll be left behind. This isn't just rhetoric. It signals a growing provincial bloc willing to take independent action, undermining Ottawa's claim of a united Canada. Premiers are also outmaneuvering Ottawa by building real economic partnerships with Indigenous communities. Alberta has committed $3 billion in equity stakes and millions for training and scholarships to secure Indigenous support for energy projects. Ontario is following suit, calling this a golden opportunity for genuine reconciliation.
Alberta independence is the elephant in this room.
Do you support Alberta exiting Canadian Confederation and becoming a sovereign nation?
Well, the Premier insists this panel isn't about separation, but some say it is about giving separatists in her party a chance to be heard.
While Ottawa still talks about reconciliation for political points, provinces are offering real ownership and shared profits, flipping decades of mistrust into collaboration. Canada is now squeezed from two sides. Externally, U.S. tariffs threaten to cripple industries and force Ottawa into concessions. Internally, provinces no longer trust the federal government to protect their interests and are building parallel economic strategies. If Ottawa doesn't find a way to reconcile these tensions, Canada risks becoming a patchwork of provinces, each pursuing its own trade and energy policies, weakening its leverage with Washington. Prime Minister Mark Carney insists Canada is united and stronger than ever, but the reality is slipping out of his hands. Premiers aren't waiting. Washington isn't softening, and ordinary Canadians are already paying the price in higher costs and threatened jobs. The question is no longer how long can Canada hold out, but rather can Ottawa change course fast enough to restore confidence at home before the U.S. forces Canada into a weaker bargaining position.
The MAGA fault line seems to be widening from a fracture into a Grand Canyon-sized chasm after President Trump called the very MAGA supporters who re-elected him stupid and foolish for refusing his demand to back off the Epstein files.
Donald Trump is facing something his presidency wasn't built to survive: rejection. Not from his political opponents, but from his base and from America's closest allies. At home, the Epstein controversy has fractured MAGA. Abroad, Canada, the country once most tightly linked to the U.S. economy, is pulling back. The Trump strategy of power through loyalty is now being tested by the one thing it never planned for: disloyalty.
Couple reasons. Number one, I do think that the MAGA base will follow Trump on policy wherever he goes. The reason this is different is because this contradicts who Donald Trump has shown his base to be since he erupted into the political scene in 2015. Donald Trump.
The Epstein case, long dormant in public memory, has erupted again, and this time, it's not Democrats fueling the flames. It's MAGA itself. In recent weeks, prominent figures within the pro-Trump media ecosystem have turned against the president over his refusal to pursue full disclosure of the Epstein files. These are the very influencers who helped build the MAGA identity, and now they're accusing Trump of betrayal. Trump's response was blunt. He dismissed the renewed focus on Epstein as a distraction and told his base to move on. That only made things worse. His most loyal followers are now questioning whether Trump is shielding the very elite power structure he once promised to expose. This isn't just frustration, it's a breakdown in identity. The narrative of draining the swamp was foundational to MAGA. The Epstein list was supposed to be proof of that mission. And now, Trump's unwillingness to act is being seen not as strategy, but as surrender. Inside the White House, several options have reportedly been considered: appointing a special counsel, holding daily briefings, even a press tour by former Florida AG Pam Bondi. None of it happened. Trump believes saying "it's over" should be enough. But his base doesn't agree. Commentators close to the movement now warn that 10% of the MAGA vote could walk away, a figure that could cost Republicans up to 40 House seats in 2026. There's a reason Trump is stonewalling. He likely knows what's in the redacted sections of the Epstein documents. The fear isn't just political, it may be personal or legal. And that fear is paralyzing his ability to lead the very movement he created.
We don't want to do this anymore.
Ontario, where Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled a set of measures to protect the Canadian steel industry. The move coming as the steel sector in Canada struggles under the weight of 50% U.S. tariffs.
While Trump faces revolt at home, abroad, his trade strategy is pushing allies away. On June 4th, the U.S. imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian steel. Canada's response came in mid-July, when Prime Minister Mark Carney announced sweeping measures to protect the domestic steel industry. These included strict import quotas, a 25% tariff on Chinese-origin steel, and a new procurement rule: Canadian steel for Canadian projects. Ottawa also committed $70 million Canadian dollars for worker retraining, part of a broader plan to shift away from dependence on the U.S. market. The timing was no accident. Trade talks between the U.S. and Canada are ongoing, with Trump threatening a broader 35% tariff on all Canadian imports starting August 1st. Carney's message is clear. Canada will no longer wait passively. The alliance may survive, but not unconditionally. Donald Trump's rise was built on controlling the story. But now, both the MAGA base and U.S. allies are writing their own. In the U.S., the Epstein issue is not going away. In Canada, the trade relationship is being redefined without Washington's lead. This isn't collapse, but it is contraction of trust, control, and credibility. Trump isn't losing to Democrats or foreign adversaries. He's losing ground to the very people who once followed him without question.
They call it pink gold
potash is a vital ingredient for growing food and Canada production volume. It's now being touted as a secret weapon in this trade war with the United States.
The countdown is on. Canada and the United States are deep in trade talks, facing a hard deadline, August 1st. If no deal is reached, President Trump has vowed to impose a sweeping 35% tariff on Canadian imports. It's not just a threat, it's already been formalized in writing. Behind closed doors, Prime Minister Mark Carney is walking a tightrope. On one side, Canada's economy, still heavily tied to the U.S. market. On the other, a U.S. president who's turned tariffs into a political weapon. Carney's strategy has been quiet but deliberate. He's paused Canada's digital services tax, offered symbolic defense cooperation through the U.S. Missile Shield program, and tried to avoid any public confrontation. But now, many in Canada believe that's not enough. They say it's time to put real pressure on Trump, and one word keeps coming up: potash.
Gulf Islands Member of Parliament Elizabeth May, she's calling on Carney to continue collecting the digital sales tax. She's also pitching stopping the $4.9 billion exportation of Canadian potash, a key ingredient for fertilizer to American farmers.
Potash is a key ingredient in fertilizer. Without it, global food production would shrink dramatically. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, over 50% of the world's food supply depends on fertilizers, and potash provides the potassium that makes them effective. Canada holds the largest reserves of potash on the planet, with most production centered in Saskatchewan. The United States, by contrast, produced only around 400,000 metric tons of potash in 2023, while consuming more than 5.3 million tons. The numbers speak for themselves. The U.S. depends on Canadian potash, and that makes it different from other traded goods. Cars, aluminum, even semiconductors can be sourced elsewhere. But with Russia and Belarus, the two other major global suppliers, facing sanctions or instability, Canada is essentially the only reliable source left. Any disruption could push fertilizer prices up, and with it, the cost of food across North America. That's why some Canadian leaders are calling for action. They want the federal government to put potash on the negotiating table, not just as a commodity, but as a bargaining chip. One proposal includes halting the $4.9 billion in potash exports to the U.S. entirely. Another suggests creating a national strategic reserve supported by public investment through bonds, an idea costed by Canada's Parliamentary Budget Office during the 2025 federal election. Their logic is simple. If Trump is using pain as leverage, Canada should do the same. And if that pain touches U.S. farmers, one of Trump's most loyal constituencies, it may force a recalibration in Washington.
But the simple logic is, if the price of the fertilizer goes up that much,
food prices go up.
Everything goes up, and it's food.
There's a risk in weaponizing potash. It's not just another industrial input. It's tied directly to food supply, inflation, and food security. Disrupting potash shipments could hurt not only U.S. farmers but ripple through the global economy. Industry leaders in Saskatchewan warn that tariffs and trade barriers on potash are different. Unlike cars or steel, potash is not optional. It's essential. That's why some argue Canada doesn't need to issue threats. The numbers alone, the dependency, the market imbalance, are powerful enough. The mere possibility of disruption may be all the leverage Canada needs. Trump thrives on confrontation. He pushes hard, expecting others to blink. But this time, he may have met a different kind of resistance. Not loud, not angry, but strategic. Potash isn't just Canada's economic strength. It's America's agricultural lifeline. Whether Canada uses it openly or quietly, it may be the one card strong enough to bring Trump back to the table. Not with bluster, but with a deal.